everyone. Thank you for tuning in into this week's interview done by Hume Audio, where we interview artists and producers to know a little bit more about their work, their creative process. Today we have a very special artist and producer with us. I'm very happy to welcome Rob Kleiner, who is a Grammy-nominated songwriter and producer. Worked with artists such as Sia, The Weeknd, Britney Spears. More recently has worked with Labyrinth. Also created music for the show Euphoria, Silo, and Andra Day, and the list goes on. So, Rob, thank you so much for joining today. How are you?
I'm doing very well. Thanks for having me.
Amazing. Where are you tuning in from today?
I'm in Los Angeles, California, in my home studio.
Yeah, I can see the awards hanging on the wall behind you.
Oh, yeah. Just some red plaques back there.
That's amazing. So yeah, maybe let's jump right in. If you can tell us a little bit, how did music came about in your life? Where did you start? How did you start in production and all that stuff? If you can let us know a little bit.
Yeah, I mean, I think probably like anybody, music came as a, like intense passion pretty early, when I was a kid. And I just knew I always wanted to just be writing songs. And I wanted to like live in a recording studio when I was young. I just wanted to be in a recording studio every day. I thought it was just awesome to be able to, I love listening to albums, and I just wanted to make albums, every day. And, at first, production wise, I kind of avoided becoming a producer. I was really focused on writing, but I was always spending so much money going to studios that I realized pretty early on, like, I cannot afford to go pay a studio every time I write a song, because I'm going to write lots of songs over my life, hopefully. And I need to learn how to do this on my own. And that's kind of what got me into production.
That's amazing. I think that's a struggle that a lot of artists, especially nowadays, that we go through, right? It's like we learn production at first because we have to, and because we have the technical means now to do it. Like, we can pretty decently have a home studio without spending too much. So how did that expand with time? How did music production really became more of a thing? And when did you feel there was like a shift in your career, going through maybe more of a struggling artist, at the beginning, to at some point getting really established in the industry? How did that happen for you?
Yeah, I think it's all kind of, a rabbit hole. You start off being a songwriter and I need to learn production so that I can, record all these songs that I'm writing. And now I need to learn how to mix because I need to have the songs that I'm producing and writing sound good. And then I need to learn how to master because I'm just, doing so much of this stuff. I can't afford to hire somebody every time I do it. And, what happens over time is you end up getting, a lot better at all those things. Obviously, the first song I wrote was probably not a great song, but, the 100th song I wrote was a little bit better. And the 500th song I wrote was probably even better than that. And the same goes with production, and the same goes with mixing, and the same goes with mastering. And it's all kind of, it spawns from necessity. Like you mentioned, just we need to do this as creators, or at very least have some type of knowledge about it, because maybe your goals aren't to be a producer or a mixer, but to be able to, if you're working with them all day long, you need to be able to communicate with them. I'm sure anybody, producer or mixer, has worked with clients that are not musical, and they say, well, it just needs a little more magic, and they can't explain what they want. That's not going to help either. So even if your goals aren't to become the best, producer or engineer in the world, I think it helps any artist or anybody, have some sort of knowledge in it, something very basic, even, just so, you can get that much further with your own stuff and being able to communicate with the people you're working with.
Did you go through like the more academic route where you like studied music and production at some point, or you went more like on the self-taught direction where you just learned by doing on your own, maybe had help with some other producers that were, you know, more experienced than you at the time? How did that happen?
Yeah, I did study a little bit of music production when I went to college, but really not that much. I watched every time I was in a studio that I was paying for what they were doing. I asked a lot of questions. I guess that was my earliest like learning in that you know in production. And then as I went farther, it's exactly what you just said. I had producers' phone numbers on speed dial that knew this stuff better than me. And so I'd be working and I'd run into a roadblock, or I'd say, how can I get, a sound that I'm not somehow not being able to achieve, ring, 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 call my buddy up or a few buddies that I would annoy, and hopefully get some insight into. And it's very lucky to like have, good people in your network that can help for that kind of thing.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. I do a little bit of production as well. And I feel like this is how I learned. I started as an artist and I just spent countless hours in studios, like sitting next to the sound engineer or the mixing engineer and just watching everything, every, click on the computer and trying to learn what I could.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think it's one of the best ways to learn. What about like the technology? Because obviously, I mean, in the last decade or so, the technology we have access to has changed so much. Like it's such a radical difference. So, compared to when you started, I don't really know like how many years ago you really started as being invested as a producer, and the gear and technology you were using at the time compared to today. Like what are the tools you used to use and what are the tools that you favor now?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think I probably started getting serious about production back in like 2004, 2005, and back then it was like, what do I buy? Do I buy this really expensive thing or this really cheap thing, and what's going to work best? Even back then, and I didn't have any money back then, even to buy cheap gear, let alone like nice gear. But for me, it was always like, buy the nicest stuff I can, because, there's things, like, especially back then, it was like you get what you pay for a lot of times with stuff. So I tried to, I know if I'm not getting the sounds I want, it's not my gear's fault, it's my fault. So I kind of like always invested in myself that way. And, as far as the evolution of technology, there's been leaps and bounds. Everything today, even, the stuff you get free when you buy Logic or Ableton or even, any of the DAWs, it's just awesome. It gives people, thousands and thousands of dollars of a head start into what they're doing, producing, at least in the box wise. And the stuff is great quality. I mean, I remember I used to have to like hunt for a really authentic sounding like violin if I was trying to do some classical stuff. And it was like, you had to, you heard a ton of terrible ones that were trying to be authentic, and then you'd find this one and you'd have to buy the whole set. And I had like I remember I had like this 10 DVD set of this orchestral things, and I had to load every DVD into the computer and, to get that really authentic sounding violin or cello or whatever. And these days, just like the strings that come free with Ableton are at least probably that good. They're amazing. So yeah, everything's come a long way in an awesome way. And I think that helps level the playing field. You don't have to have money to make something sound great these days. You just have to be creative.
Yeah, that's so true. And what kind of producer are you? Are you the kind to have like a gazillion bunch of plugins and tools, and every project you kind of like pick and choose what you think is best? Or you're more the kind to have like maybe a smaller set of tools that really, really, really well, and that that will work pretty much in all kinds of projects that you do. Because I know there's different trends, right? Like different people work in different ways. So I know some producers are very religious about some tools that they use, and others just like to have a bunch of them and pick and choose. So
yeah, it's funny. I see like tutorials or people giving advice online about workflow and stuff like that, and people bring up templates a lot and like how much time that can save you and how great they are. But to be honest, like I've never used templates. Like every project to me, I like it to be a blank slate, and I don't like falling into kind of trends of using certain things all the time. I do have a ton of plugins. I've got way too many, and don't get me wrong, I don't use all of them, all the time. I definitely have favorites and go-tos, but I kind of like to keep things open, and maybe I'm mistyping Fab Filter when I'm searching for a plugin, and I type in something else. Oh, that plugin. Yeah, maybe I'll try that crazy thing on this. And, I don't know. I like to not kind of, settle on just like, I have so many of them. Why not try to use them? That being said, I absolutely have favorites and ones that show up in mixes and productions way more than others, for sure.
Can you give us a little bit of insights? Like, what are some of your favorite tools that you like to use almost all the time?
Well, I'm probably like everybody in the world, like I love Fab Filter Pro Q3. That is, like the holy grail of all EQs. And, I helped understand EQ just by using it. Compressor, I love the UAD 1176 stuff. Mm-hmm. As far as like instruments go, I am a big fan of Omnisphere. I use that a lot. Labyrinth got me into pigments, Arturia, which is really great. Contact is a nice little Swiss Army knife for lots of different things that I use a lot. Serum. And then if we're getting into effects, I love Yum Audio stuff. I love Baby Audio stuff. And yeah, to name a few, of course, I do a lot of vocal production. So Vocaline is really key for that. And that's it's like, you don't even think about that one because everybody's been using it for so long, but it's so key and so important. I love Gullfoss and Soothe. Those are two of my favorite mixing plugins. I use those a ton and all the time. And let's see, what else am I forgetting? I love saturation plugins, and I have like a million of those for a million different things. I use Waves ones, UAD ones. Wow, to name a few. And yeah, how am I doing? Is that
yeah, that's a pretty extensive list. That's awesome though. Yeah, I guess it keeps the work interesting, right? If you always have new tools to work with and to experiment with, it's like so many different colors that you can play with. So thank you for sharing that. Sure. And so you mentioned liking Yum Audio plugins for effects. Mm-hmm. So what about lo-fi music? Is it an aesthetic that got you that you're actively interested in? Is it something that you use only for certain kind of projects?
Yeah, I think that like lo-fi and like a lot of the Yum Audio plugins, the thing that's really great about them, even if you're not going full on like lo-fi with them, is to bring a sense of, what we all grew up with, a sense of like warmth or imperfection to especially electronic music. It can get just so stale and so boring, to me, unless you're using stuff like that. You need some type of human element, some like back before I even used low-fi plugins, I would, if I was playing a piano part in a song, I would try to like throw in a little tiny mistake or something like that, on purpose. And now instead of thinking like that, I think, okay, get it in, play like you know what you're doing on the piano, and then kind of manipulate it with some stuff, like a little pitch dropout or a little, tape kind of wobble, and give it some type of human touch that way.
Yeah, I call that like the quest for the perfect imperfection. Like this is something
Nice.
that like fascinates me. And I mean, that's why I've always been really in love with lo-fi aesthetic. It's because, but back in the day, I don't know if you were, one of those, kind of crazy people that like to experiment. But I remember like spending sessions back in the day where everything was still so analog, where we would just try to like, take a half broken amp that had like some glitches or something, and then, take, out of tune guitars and made those textures that were not perfect. The idea was not to get something perfect, but it was interesting. And it was like that quest for the interesting imperfection, which I feel like, now it's just so much easier to achieve something like that with the tools that we have.
You mean slapping a Yum Audio plugin's easier than finding a busted amp and beer? Yeah,
Definitely.
totally.
I mean, there was a fun also like back in the day, I guess, where we were like, playing with anything that we could get our hands on, really. But yeah, now we had a chance to go much deeper into process, I guess. So
and said, it is absolutely fun to tinker around with stuff like that, but there's also something to be said about like keeping your workflow consistent and moving. If it takes me half a day to set up a piece of analog gear to maybe get a sound I like, that can be a really frustrating process if that's how you're spending a lot of your time day in and day out. And that's time that you're not really creating anything, that's like pre-production. And so to be able to achieve some of these things that you're talking about with a couple clicks of the button, is all, to me, is a great alternative.
For sure. Yeah, definitely. Is there like any little demo or a little something that you could show us that maybe, can show us how you would use like such a plugin, or like how you like to treat sound using this kind of plugin?
Yeah, I could pull something up. So let me see. Here's something I used Tape Stop on the other day. So like, here we go now. Here we go. So it's like a vocal and saying, here we go now, and I'm hitting the tape stop. Here we go now. Here we go. Like, it's a little dip at the end. Maybe it's a little subtle. Let's see if I can bring it out a little more. Here we go now. Here we go. Here we go now. Here we go. And then like, here's a little, I think this is just isolated the drop, but now. Go.
Now. Cool.
Yeah. Go. Just a little fun thing, to add at the end of a phrase, and when I used that, I had, an artist and the writer in the room, and they had just sung the part. And I said, oh, what if we try this tape stop thing at the end of the phrase? And their like minds were blown. Their eyes were like, what is that? I need that. How did you do that? Like, they were literally jumping. I've never had a reaction to a plugin like that in my studio. They thought it was like, I think probably on their next 10 things, you're going to hear that, even if they don't do them with me.
That's really cool. Yeah, it's like the glitter. It's like the little like touch of magic that you can put in on a track that just opens it up in a new kind of way. So that's really fun. That's what I like about Yum Audio plugins as well.
Absolutely.
So, what about your creative process? So, let's say you receive an email, an artist contacts you, or maybe a record label contacts you and says, hey, we've got, this artist on board. We think that you would be a really good producer. Maybe you could write a song or two as well for the album. What happens from there?
Yeah. Then a couple weeks later, get a knock at the door, and I have an awkward moment where I'm saying hi to the artist, and they're saying hi to me. And yeah, how did we link up again? Oh, it was Jerry from the record label, or Susan from my publisher. Okay, yeah, right. And then we have a little coffee, and it's still a little bit awkward, and we talk about life or things they like or what they're listening to, and then we go in the studio and try to come up with something awesome. And a lot of times you don't come up with something awesome, but and it's always you never know if you're going to get along, if you're going to have similar tastes, if you're going to be on the same page. But every once in a while, it turns out great, and it can become something amazing, and those are awesome days. And then from there, maybe you do more, and you don't have to have the awkward conversation in the beginning. You just kind of ask how things are going, and then you get back into it, and and you keep going, and hopefully make a bunch of hits.
What do you prefer? Do you prefer like when people come in and have a very clear idea of what they're hearing or what they're looking for as an end result? Or do you prefer someone that, just comes really with a clean slate, maybe just has, a sketch of a song, nothing really done, and tells you like, go, I love what you do. I love your sound. Go, what's your favorite process?
There's no one right answer to that. Everything can work cool. It could be, somebody has no ideas, blank slate, or can come in with knowing exactly what they want. That can be helpful, because then I know how to best get there for them, hopefully. I'm also, I kind of consider myself a songwriter before a producer. So sometimes I'll have an idea, and it's like, could this work for your artist project? Here you go. Like, I'll sing a hook or something, or play, a bit of something. And I start a lot of sessions out like that. And that can be fun. I know some producers don't like doing that because they don't want to like force their aesthetics on the artists they're working with. But like, I like forcing my aesthetics on the artists I'm working with. And if it doesn't work out and doesn't match up, then like maybe we shouldn't be writing together. But I also love it when an artist comes in and says, hey, like a great way to start a session out is, I've always loved this song, and I've always wanted to make something similar to it. I don't know if similar to it means the vibe of the track, or, the structure, or the way the concept works, but having something that they've always loved and kind of wanting to put their own, twist on it or stamp on it. That's a great way to start a creative session, I think.
Yeah. And, do you have, like, you mentioned like you're a songwriter. So do you write also songs for your own projects? I'm guessing you're also recording your own music, still publishing your own music?
I write and record a bit of my own music, but that is mostly for fun, and I don't put any effort into marketing or anything like that. I'm mostly focused on other artists' material, and I like that because one of the things I struggled with I used to be an artist for a while. I used to be in a band, and we toured for a long time, a whole decade. We were on the road doing 200 shows a year, like tons of that. And what I struggled with was, when you are an artist, you have an identity, you have a sound or something that your fans like, and you make an album and they like that and they fall in love with it and they want to hear those songs. And then you make another album. There's a lot of times kind of an obligation to be that artist again, even though it might be years later after your first one, you might want to express something totally new. You've now created an identity, and you're a little bit, in a lot of cases, painted into a box. Now, obviously, there's some artists that break that mold or whatever and don't follow that. But for me, it was very tricky when I wanted to reinvent myself, there was expectations that I wouldn't be reinventing myself. And so I found being a producer kind of throws all that out the window and allows you to express different things on different days and reinvent yourself year after year. And that is much more suited to my, the way I like to roll when I'm making music.
Oh, I hear you. This is like such an important point that you're bringing. And I think that a lot of artists don't realize that when they start their career. Like, it's not necessarily something that you think about. Like, you just think that things are going to go naturally and that you're going to evolve and that people are going to evolve with you. But it's definitely a big trap that I think a lot of artists feel confined in. And I think that's why we see a lot of artists, the first album is great. The second album sometimes is still great. The third album, yes, you're already, and then it's
yeah.
So yeah.
A lot they're damned if they do, damned if they don't. It's like, if you make a second record that sounds like your first one, now you're boring. What happened to this artist that I love? It's a very tricky thing to navigate, and I feel for all the artists that have to figure that out. And I'm glad I'm not one of them.
Yeah, I can understand. It's true that, if you're working with so many different artists, like, it always gets interesting. You always have like new sounds, new colors to play with, new directions. It never gets boring, I can imagine.
Yeah, like I said, it's nice to, I as a producer get to wake up and have a blank slate. Today I want to do hip hop, or today I want to do R&B, or today I want to be like 60s lo-fi throwback, and I can start out any day, with anything I fancy.
What was a moment in if you can share with us, like if there was a moment in your career where you feel that you went from maybe being like an unknown artist to having your breakthrough? Like, I think a lot of, people starting out, whether it's as a producer or as an artist, we have still this image of like the moment we're going to break through the industry. Like, is that a myth? Is this something that happened to you, or you feel it was something that was more gradual? Or what was the trigger?
Yeah.
What was an event that triggered that shift?
Well, I could tell that story in two ways. I can tell it where I tell you I was a starving artist one day, and then I wrote a song, and CeeLo recorded it, and it went on one of the Twilight movie soundtracks. And then the next day I was not a starving artist anymore. So that's the short version, and that sounds like, oh wow, it was like overnight success. But the long version is, it took me, over a decade of trying things like that and trying to make those opportunities happen and failing over and over again. And like I said, being literally a starving artist, I used to have a $5 food budget a day. Like, that's all I could afford to spend to eat food. And there was a whole decade of that before that overnight thing happened. So, of course, it was a gradual process. It was learning, putting in your 10,000 hours, as they say, of getting better at songwriting, getting better at production, writing probably hundreds of terrible songs, and, eventually getting to the point where you know what works, and you don't really write bad songs anymore. You might not write amazing songs, but you kind of know what to do, what not to do, what works and what doesn't work, just through a lot of trial and error and a lot of hard times along the way, so that, I guess that's the moment that snapped for me, was getting my first big major label cut with CeeLo. But many years went into making that happen. And so, that's it. I think along the way, though, one kind of important thing, one mindset I had was that I need to be doing this. I need to be making music. And I didn't care that I was spending $5 a day to eat. If, you know, that happened 12 years ago. And if I was still a starving artist now, I'd still be doing the exact same thing. I'd still be here eating, $5 of food a day. I would still be that exact same starving artist if that cut never happened. I mean, that's how much important it was for me to be making music. And that's how important it is for me. It's great that that changed, and I'm not a starving artist anymore, but I would have never given up. I would have stayed that course forever. That I knew, from an early age that this was for me. This is what I want to do with my life.
Wow, amazing. I mean, I had one last question for you, even though I feel you've already almost answered it. But I wanted to finish this amazing interview with just asking you if you have any words of wisdom or, any advice for people that right now are in that position where maybe they've started a few years ago, they're still in that phase of development, they still don't feel like they've had their big break. What would you say to artists still in development in that way?
Yeah, I mean, I would say, look, it's gonna probably take a while. You're gonna have to get really good at these things that you're doing. Are you gonna be okay with it taking 10 years? Are you gonna be okay with it taking 15 years? Are you gonna be okay with it taking 20 years? If the answer is yes, then absolutely this is what you should be doing. If the answer is, well, I don't know. I mean, if I haven't made it in, next 6 months, then I don't think I can handle doing that for a whole year. Then that's probably not for you. But if this is what you need to do and you'll ride it out for however long it takes, I hope it doesn't take that long for you. But that's the type of attitude that you need, I think, to make it work. And I think it will work. I think when you spend enough time at anything, whether it's music or maybe it's working any other type of industry or job, when you get really good at it, you become a commodity, and what you're doing becomes needed, and you become the guy people need to go to, or the girl that people need to go to for that kind of thing. And it's like the cream rises to the top. Somebody that knows what they're doing, they're gonna get there. And I think it can be a hard road, but if it's your dream, it should be a hard road, and it'll be worth it, and you'll be happy.
Amazing. So what can we expect from you in the coming months? Are you working on anything right now that you can share with us? Any interesting projects that you're waiting to release?
Yeah, I have. This year I worked with Labyrinth on season 2 of Euphoria. I mixed and mastered all that. I've been working a lot more with Labyrinth, and we have more stuff coming out this year, which I'm really excited about. Besides that, I work with a couple indie artists, and we do a lot of sync and licensing stuff, and that's always fun. I have a little project called Foxy, Foxxi, that I do with my friend Tyler and Natalie. And we're always putting out stuff and always have our stuff in commercials and stuff on TV. So more of that. And a couple things that I can't really talk about yet that I'm hoping I can talk about soon.
Amazing. Well, we'll have to follow you and stay tuned to know what's coming up. Rob, thank you so much for your time. This was an amazing interview. Thank you so much for opening about your process and your work. I think a lot of people are going to find this useful and also inspiring. I mean, it's inspiring to see, someone start really from the start, more in a self-taught point, and, rise up to the way to where you are now. So thank you so much.
Thanks. Yeah, thanks for having me.